morning, Cody left for school. He forgot his spelling homework on the pass-through shelf. I saw it sitting there, 12 words in his careful print, and I told myself I'd run it over on my break. That was 7:15. By 8:45, I was sitting in the back of a police cruiser with my hands behind my back, and the homework was the last thing on my mind. I've been the short-order cook at Calhoun's Diner for 3 years. The regulars call me Eli. I get in at 6, I pull the flat top up to temp. I make eggs the way people want them, and I go home to Cody by 4. That's the whole shape of my life, and I built it that way on purpose. The world doesn't know what I did before, and I see no reason to tell it. The boy came in at 8:20. He sat at the far end of the counter, ordered nothing, and kept his jacket zipped to the collar, even though it was already warm. I noticed him the way I notice everything. Quietly, without making it a thing. His hands weren't still, his eyes kept going to the door. Gerald Prater, the morning manager, was counting the register drawer when the boy stood up. He was 17 at most. The knife was a folding utility blade, the kind you buy at a hardware store. His voice cracked when he told Gerald not to move. The 4 customers in the dining room were out the door in 30 seconds. I watched them go. I watched Gerald go pale. I watched the boy's hand shake. I didn't leave. I set down the spatula. I stepped around the pass-through and I said quietly, "Gerald, go on out the side door. I've got it from here." Gerald looked at me like I'd lost my mind. The boy swung toward me. I kept my hands where he could see them, and I held still. "Gerald," I said again. "Side door now." He went. What happened in the next 32 minutes? I knew how to do. I won't dress it up as anything mysterious. I learned it over 14 years, in rooms a lot colder and a lot more dangerous than a roadside diner in Millhaven, Georgia. You find the thread, the one live thing the person in front of you still cares about, and you hold it steady. You don't argue, you don't command. Keep your voice at the same pitch, the same pace, the same careful weight, like you're laying a bridge plank by plank over water you can't see the bottom of. You listen, and you let them hear themselves, and slowly the knife stops, meaning the same thing it meant when they walked in. The first 5 minutes are the hardest. That's when the adrenaline is loudest and the margin for a bad move is thinnest. I pulled a stool from behind the counter and sat down on it, slowly, plain sight. Because height is threat and sitting is not. I asked him if he'd eaten this morning. He hadn't. I told him there was coffee on and that I was going to 2 cups, one for him and one for me, and I was going to do it slowly with both hands showing, and I did exactly that. His name was Darnell. His mother was sick. He'd missed 3 weeks of work at the hardware store caring for her, and they'd let him go anyway. And the rental office had sent a notice that morning. He hadn't slept. He'd grabbed the knife out of his own apron pocket on the way out the door, and he wasn't entirely sure why. I told him I understood about not sleeping. I told him about Cody, about the year after my wife passed, when Cody was 8, and how some mornings I sat at the kitchen table for a long time before I could make myself get up. I wasn't performing. That part was real. By minute 20, he was sitting on a counter stool. By minute 30, he'd set the knife down on the laminate and put his face in, his hands. I didn't touch the knife. I left it where it was, and I sat across from him, and I said, "There are people outside. When you're ready, we'll walk out together, and I'll stay right beside you. Nobody's going to rush you." What I didn't know was that a woman in a sedan on the county road had been filming through the window for 20 minutes. She couldn't hear anything. From her angle, all she could see was a large man in an apron blocking the exit, and a teenager hunched over a counter. She called it in as an active hostage situation. We came through the front door at 8:52. Darnell, first, hands up, me half a step behind with my hand on his shoulder. There were 4 cruisers on the gravel. Detective Alan Pryor was the one who came off the hood of his car and told me to get my hands up and get on my knees. I did it without arguing. I've been on that side of a scene before, and I know what it looks like from the outside when you don't have the context. I went down on the gravel, and I let him put the cuffs on, and I kept my voice level when I told him the boy needed a medic and some water, not handcuffs. Pryor wasn't cruel about it, he was certain. Those are different things. They put me in the back of a cruiser, and they put Darnell in a separate one, and I sat there for a while watching the diner's neon sign buzz in the morning light. Cody's homework was still on the pass-through shelf. I thought about that. I thought about his school calling the house and getting no answer. I thought about what it looks like on a screen. When a large man in an apron is blocking the only door, and a teenager is hunched over the counter, behind him, and I thought, yeah, I understand how she read it. The woman with the phone had already posted the video online by 9:15. By 9:40, it had been viewed 40,000 times, and the caption said, "Cook holds customer at knife point inside Georgia diner." I didn't know any of that. I was still in the cruiser. What I did know was that Pryor was going to run my name. That was fine. I'd known the file was there for 3 years, sitting in a federal database, and I'd never been bothered by it. I just didn't talk about it. The file came back in 40 minutes. I know this because that's when Pryor opened the cruiser door and uncuffed me himself, without anyone asking him to. He stood there for a moment with the cuffs in his hand before he said anything. I've seen that look before. Not on a guilty man's face, but on a careful man's face, when the facts just rearrange themselves in a way that costs him something to admit. He didn't try to minimize it. I respected that. He handed me back my wallet and my keys, and he said, "Mr. Greer, I owe you an explanation, and a better one than I gave you this morning. The file, my full personnel record, from 14 years with the Bureau's Crisis Negotiation Unit, laid out rather plainly who I was. 31 successful resolutions, 6 commendations. A unit citation in 2017 for a school situation in Baton Rouge that lasted 11 hours. Resigned in good standing in 2021 to come home to Cody. Prior, to his credit, read all of it. Sandra Moffett arrived at the station at 11:30. She was the regional operations director for the chain that owned Calhoun's, and she'd driven down from Atlanta when the video started circulating. She had paperwork in her hand when she walked through the door. Could see from across the room what kind of paperwork it was. Pryor intercepted her in the hallway. I don't know exactly what he said to her. I was in the break room drinking bad coffee and calling Cody's school to let them know I was fine. What I know is that 15 minutes later, Sandra Moffett came through the door alone, without the paperwork, and she sat down across from me and was quiet for a moment. I had the wrong picture, she said. Most people did, I told her. The angle was bad. She asked me why I hadn't said anything, why I'd never told anyone at the diner about my background. I told her the truth, because I didn't need to. I came to make eggs and go home to my son. What I used to do didn't need to come with me. She was quiet again. Then she asked if I'd be willing to come back. I thought about Cody's homework on the shelf. I thought about the morning regulars and the way the flat top sounds when it's up to temp. I thought about Darnell, who was 17 years old and had walked out of that diner, instead of doing something that would have followed him the rest of his life. I told her yes, I'd come back, same hours, same terms. One condition, Darnell's case gets handled right. He needed a social worker and a housing referral, not a felony. She said she'd make some calls. She kept her word. I know because his mother's aide called the diner 2 weeks later and asked for Eli by name. She said, Darnell wanted me to know he'd found a new position and the rental was sorted. She didn't say much more than that. She didn't need to. The video eventually got a correction attached to it. Pryor put out a statement. The woman in the sedan apologized publicly, and I bear her no ill will. She saw something alarming, and she called for help. That's what you're supposed to do. That evening, I picked Cody up at the usual time. He'd heard something at school. A garbled version of it, the way things travel when you're 11. He climbed into the truck and looked at me with those serious eyes of his. Did something happen at the diner? He said. A little bit, I said. It's handled. He thought about that for a block or two. Then he said, were you scared? I thought about Darnell's shaking hand, about the knife on the laminate, about the gravel on my knees and the sound of the cruiser door. Not really, I said. I knew what to do. Cody nodded, slow and deliberate, the way he does when he's filed something away. He looked out the window at the Georgia pines going by. My homework, he said. I know, I said. I'll write a note. We drove the rest of the way home with the windows down, and the evening was warm, and I didn't need anything more than that.